Good morning. My name is Chelsea McCarthy, and on behalf of Global Genes and the Orphan Disease Center, it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all to this session on building a research strategy roadmap in your organization. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us. Before we get everything kicked off, I wanted to review a few brief housekeeping notes with you. The chat box to the left of the video allows you to interact with each other and program staff, and we hope that you will use this opportunity to make some new connections. Please note that links and resources are not able to be shared via chat. If you would like to upload any shared resources for the community, please share those on the social wall. The questions box is located to the left of your screen. We encourage you to use the questions box to share your questions with the presenters. This is your time to find answers and insights to help you advance your work as a partner in research. Please note that the speakers will not be able to see any questions entered in the chat area, rather than the official questions section. If we are not able to address all questions, we'll do our best to follow up with you afterwards. To the right of your video, you'll see the captions and translations. To utilize either, please expand the session and select your language. Thank you to Horizon and Greenwich Biosciences for your support on these tools. If you have any questions about the technology or the program, please look for the Request Support button in each session or the live support chat in the bottom right corner of all non-session pages. Finally, we encourage you to participate as active listeners and take advantage of the opportunity to hear from leaders and experts here and ask your questions of them. We want to ensure that we've created a relevant and impactful program for you, and we greatly appreciate you sharing your time with us. Before I turn it over to my esteemed speakers, I'm going to talk just really briefly about who I am and the organization that I work for and where we are in terms of developing our research strategy roadmap. So again, my name is Chelsea McCarthy. I'm the executive director of the DDX Foundation. The DDX, I should note that I am the only employee, and I started in January of this year. So I know that a lot of you joining us are coming from very small patient organizations. So I think it's important to note how small ours is. DDX syndrome is a pretty rare, a pretty newly diagnosed disease. It was first diagnosed in the US in 2014. The foundation was founded in 2015. There are about 649 known cases. I think one important thing to note in terms of the research roadmap is, for us, has been hosting in-person annual scientific conferences. So this is an opportunity for us to bring together all of the doctors and researchers and everyone that is working on DDX syndrome for an opportunity to share their findings with each other and with the families of DDX patients. I also wanted to note that we have raised about $1.2 million since the foundation was founded in 2015. Of that, 465 has to be used specifically for capacity building per the terms of the funding. So of the money left over, we've awarded just over $300,000 in research grants to date, and we are currently reviewing RFAs for additional funding. We are very fortunate to have we have three really strong scientific advisors who work with us alongside of our board and with me to review any kind of funding applications or research applications. So anything that we are considering funding goes before that committee to review. One other thing that I wanted to share with you is a tool that we have found that we follow and we find to be really helpful in terms of developing your research strategy. Again, I just want to be really cognizant of the fact that I know there are small patient groups that are listening in today and joining this conversation. So I just want to say, that it's so important to just start where you are. So if you are that, one or two parents that have gotten together and you're just now kind of developing your patient community and starting to talk with them, that's okay to be where you are. We found this, though, to be a useful guide to kind of figure out where to go next from there. So again, if you're the sort of entry level is to identify your patient community and start communicating with them. From there, we've moved on to developing patient-led research networks, which I'll talk about a little bit on the next slide. Then, of course, registries and biobanks, and then using that information to engage industry, and then hopefully ultimately find cures and treatments. Here's just a brief overview of our patient-focused research network. Again, I share this just to kind of show you how we've attracted these people over the few years that we've had. And then also I wanted to share with you our current publications. And this is actually a little bit out of date. This was for 2020. We haven't updated with 2021 yet. But as you can see, when the organization was first founded in 2015, we had less than 40 publications. Since then, we're now at over 150. So I just mention this to you because I think that it really sort of demonstrates how much you're able to accomplish, even if you are just a group of one or two, if you have a really strong research strategy in place. And with that, I will turn it over to Samathi Ayangar. She's going to talk to you a little bit about developing a scientific advisory board. Samathi?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you, Chelsea, and thank you to the Global Genes for having me here today. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here to share about how to build a high-impact medical scientific advisory board that will enable research and help educate families and also help families along the way. So I'm Samathi Ayangar. I'm the mother of a son who has an ultra-rare condition. It's 4 in a million boys have this condition, and it's called Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. I am the co-founder and executive director of the Wiskott-Aldrich Foundation, and my background is I'm a pediatrician. Here's my email. We've been helped over the years by so many people, so please feel free to email me with any questions that you might have. So I'll be going through who's our scientific advisory board, how did we get started, how any organization can create a successful MSAB, and what the role our MSAB plays in our organization. So just a brief overview of what is Wiskott-Aldrich syndrome. It's rare, ultra rare actually, 4 in a million boys, characterized by easy bleeding due to decreased platelet number and size. So they can get, even with a minor head injury, they can have life-threatening bleeds. They have severe infections due to immune deficiency. They're also at risk for autoimmune disorders and malignancies, especially leukemia and lymphoma. As is obvious, each one of these are life-threatening in of themselves. So life expectancy without a treatment such as a bone marrow transplant is just 14 years for those who are severely affected. Those who are less affected, the life expectancy is more. So with that, so we've started the foundation in 2010 to fund research, to find better cures, to provide support, information, education for our families, and to help families worldwide because this is an ultra-rare condition. So who are our scientific advisors? As you can see, this is a group of people from all over the globe, US, Canada, Munich, Switzerland, and they came together over time, over a couple of years, and they've changed over the years as well, as some retired and moved on. They are of diverse backgrounds, and each one carries their own expertise. Dr. Hans Ochs is the one who discovered the Wiskott gene. Dr. Adrian Thrasher is the one who does cutting-edge research on genetics, gene editing, and gene addition. So as you can see, this is just a diverse group of people who have come together to help our families. So while they are so diverse, what defines them? How does it all come together? They are the backbone. To say they are the backbone is an understatement. They help us with every facet, whether it's research, whether it's education or family support. Of course, obviously they're brilliant. That's who we pick, and they're experts in their fields. So yes, and they are a diverse group of people. But what is beautiful is the last three. What is common among them? They have all come together with a purpose to help our community to find better cures, to make things better. They're able to work collaboratively with one another and with patient advocates and with patients. And I cannot emphasize how generous, caring, and compassionate each one of them are when we ask them questions or any requests that we have of them. We're fortunate to have them. So how did this all get started? It started way back in 1999 when our little guy here with a big bleed on his head was diagnosed with Visceral syndrome. Very little was known at that time, and it still is very little is known, as a matter of fact. So when we got the diagnosis, it was gut-wrenching, and of course, I started talking to doctors around the world, there not being literature. It was a lonely journey. I reached out to Dr. Hans Aks, who diagnosed our son, and to Fabio Kandari, and to help our son. Little did I realize that ultimately these two physicians would be the backbone of our MSAB. That was not my thought at that time, but that's how it worked out. And in 2009, I was already researching and getting information. I came across the video of this young man, Jeff Burnett, who put out a call that for 3 years, he was 24 years old, for 3 years he'd been looking for an expert to treat him. And the pediatricians told him that they couldn't see him. And the adult doctors said, you should be dead by now, so we don't know what to do with you. Oh, I knew we had to do something. Patients cannot go around and look for physicians. Something has to be easier. So we created first we formed, just like Chelsea mentioned, we formed a community. We formed a discussion group. Right after that, we formed an information and resource website, and that attracted, because we had a physician database, that attracted researchers into our network. Soon after that, and this was just at the start when we were thinking of a foundation, we held our first conference. Once again, this brought together a whole bunch of experts in the disease, even before we technically had a foundation. Since then, we had a merger with another foundation, and our scientific advisory committee was formed over a year or two, and we started our first research grant cycle. Since then, it's taken off. We do biannual conferences, we do education sessions virtually now, research, which has taken off. We do pilot sessions because it's such a rare disease. We're the ones doing the first studies. And more recently, and this was not something we thought about, our scientific advisory committee is helping us work with the FDA to get gene therapy into the US. So how can any organization build their network? The first thing I will say is the last thing. Take your time to build your MSCB. Start small. We all have start. We know our physicians. We know who we go to take our children over ourselves. It's a good place to start, because once we have them, we can count on them to bring in their network members, because they have their own network. It's great to build a personal relationship with these people, because then it creates a better structure. One of the first things we did was to create an information resource website, and we began reaching out to physicians saying, hey, can we add your name in the database? Can you look at our website and see if you want to add something? And physicians began writing back to us saying, I'd like to be part of your organization. That was another way to get people in. For small diseases like ours, starting off a conference could be a good way to pull people in. Networking with other consortia, like we have done with the Primary Immune Deficiency Treatment Consortium, helps. One other cool way to do it is to offer research grants. That helps in two ways. One is it brings in new researchers, or researchers who are really interested in the disease, but you can also fund a researcher to study the disease for a year or two. And also, I think one of the things that even though I was a physician, when I looked at these amazing people, I was afraid to reach out to them. Once I began reaching out, I realized that they are cool people. They really want to help. They went into this profession to help people. So please feel comfortable to reach out. They are waiting to be reached out to. So please feel comfortable to reach out to them is one of the messages I would have. So how does it all come together? So we have our advisory board. How do we keep them engaged? How do we keep them going? One of the things we do is to engage them in education. They help develop our educational material, whether it's our website, whether it is our website publications and virtual education sessions. They run our conferences, run the agenda, tell us what to do, and they bring in fantastic speakers. In addition to this, some of the cool things that happen during these sessions is that we are able to, because we're a small group of people, we're able to give them time, FaceTime with our families. If you look at the top picture, there's Dr. Hans Oxenkindati in a small group of families, and they're holding a helmet because there was controversy of whether children should be wearing helmets or not. It's a very small question, but it was an important question for the families. And physicians learned firsthand, listening to the patients, what do the patients want? So then they go back and they're able to do research and tell us what to do. And they help drive the research forward. So this is how we bridge the gap. Second, it also helps. It also helps physicians around the world. So how did this come to pass? So here you see in this picture, Dr. Albert and Dr. Sangyan Pai, who are looking into a screen. They're actually talking to a mom in Poland. So part of our education sessions, what we do is allow patients to ask questions and present their cases. So this mom from Poland, whose son had failed transplant, asked Dr. Michael Albert, who's on our advisory board, hey, what should we do? So he talked to her and told her what to do. And in addition to that, he went on to connect with the child's physician because he realized the physician did not have experience in Buschke-Roberts syndrome. And the child is now 2 years out of transplant and doing great. So this network continues to expand, and ultimately it's our families who are being helped, which is the ultimate goal. Research, of course, they take care of a lot of things for us. They do the grant process. First, we sit down with them and identify what should the call for proposals this year look like. Then they review the applications and they go forward, they rank the applications for us. We do make a distinction because there is a conflict of interest because many of them apply for the grants themselves. We make sure that while they rank the applications, it's our board who makes the final decision and do not have them involved process. Of course, we receive expert advice on where to find the researchers, where are the existing gaps in knowledge, what should we be doing better. They have, over the last 10 years, helped speed up research. More papers, just like Chelsea pointed out, there's more research being done simply because we are now an organization and pushing this forward. They help us organize our research symposiums. So it does not just help us. The physician, there is something in it for the physicians too to take away. Because they're in direct contact with the patients, they know what to research on. They know what's important. And when industry partners come in, that is something they're looking for. Many grants nowadays look for patient advocate groups and connections with the clinicians. So the clinicians and the researchers themselves would like to be involved with the patient advocate groups because it enables them to get more grants. As you can see in this picture, this is at a conference. The physicians are just sitting there, chilling, talking to each other. Over the years, this has fostered collaborations between them because they're meeting in these informal settings, helping them to share knowledge. And ultimately, it drives our research forward and helps our families. So it's a great way to keep them engaged. Family support, typically, and while research and education are our biggest things that we do, ultimately it's family support that matters and that ends up being the most important because we need to make sure every patient, we were so alone in our journey for 10 years. Nobody should go through this. So one of the things they helped us develop was a physician database. Where can patients contact, whether they live in Vietnam or Poland, who is the best doctor for them or who can they reach out to? If a patient or a physician needs help because it's a rare disease and there's not information out there, we can connect them with our MSAB and they actually can get on Skype, they answer questions by email, they get on the phone. It's just an amazing resource to have. And for international patients where in many countries there is no bone marrow transplant facilities, our physicians and our organization is willing to provide what we refer to as concierge care. Just to take an example, there's this little boy, Abdullah from Yemen, whose dad literally, this is the note he put out, SOS, a desperate call to humanity to save this little child's life because there were no resources in Yemen. The dad was doing everything he could and he reached out to say, how can you help? With our MSAB, we contacted physicians in Saudi Arabia, in Jordan, in Iran. We couldn't get this child to safety. Finally, we contacted a physician in India, Dr. Maman Chandy, who's here, and he's actually known as the father of transplants. And what is amazing is once we started reaching out, there was this huge network of organizations, literally the universe conspiring to help save this child. This child was ultimately, and it was no easy task getting him from Yemen because the borders were closed. The embassies had to help step in to even let Abdul out of the country. I was so happy to say he had his transplant. The transplant failed. He had a second transplant, and here he is going to school. A miracle indeed. So ultimately, at the core of everything we do is the patients and their families. And that's true for our scientific advisors and for all our organizations out there. This is what you are all about too. We want to help. So if we all get together, this is what we can do for our patients and their families. And the MSAB is more than happy to help with this. So I just wanted to say in closing, thank you. None of this would have been possible without our board members, all of who are volunteers, but an entirely volunteer-run organization, and all these organizations and consortiums who have helped us along the way. It's been a wonderful journey for us, and for each organization, I encourage you, as small as big you are, keep going forward and you'll get to where you want to go. I really appreciate and thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Hello, everyone. I am now going to present to you about building a research strategy roadmap for your organization. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about the history about how we did it. I used to previously, before my role at the Ehlers-Danlos Society, run the UK organization EDS UK, and there was the US organization known as EDNF. And we were working collaboratively at times, but largely the national organizations were working in silos. And we had the professional networks, the scientific community also working amongst themselves. In 2012, a couple of the health professionals, the geneticists, hosted the first scientific meeting, the International Symposium in Ghent. And the concept of an international consortium focused on research was introduced. The problem was that there was no organization out there to facilitate the work, and the doctors were extraordinarily busy doing all of the work themselves. So we realized that it was going to take a support group organization to do it, but at that time, neither organization had the capacity. We met again in 2015 and met in Glasgow and said, if we were to launch an international organization that was focused largely on research and collaboration, would that be something that the scientific community would get behind? And the answer was unanimously yes, and it's massively needed. Within a national organization, we found that there was only so much you could do, and we felt like we were putting, as Americans say, a Band-Aid over a gaping wound. And what we really wanted to do was start healing that wound. And that's what we believed that we could do with a global organization. So at an international symposium in New York City in 2016, the creation of the Ehlers-Danlos Society was born and launched out of what was EDNF. I left EDS UK to come and help run that organization, and the EDNF, as it was known as a US organization, was no longer, and our international mission was born. One of the most important things that we did when we launched was to also launch the International Consortium on EDS and HSD, which brought together all the healthcare professionals from around the world for the first time ever, so that they could work collaboratively instead of in silos on various different priorities. And I will elaborate on that on my next slide. But just also to show you the continuation of that journey, in 2018, we launched the creation of our global registry, which to date has almost 15,000 people on it, which is very large for a rare disease. We then had another international symposium in Ghent in 2018. And we were supposed to have our symposium in Rome this year, but COVID-19 had other ideas, and we've postponed it to next year. So we are delighted how our vision of bringing everyone together has flourished and continued. So what is the International Consortium? When we first launched back in 2016, it was about 96 different people from around the world, the world as well, with different disciplines. We had a working group for all of the different comorbidities that are associated with EDS and HSD. We now have close to, I think, 160 people. It's grown. People want to be a part of it. We also have a peer review group of people. So when we don't have room, because we don't want the working groups to be too large, we have anywhere from 6 to 15 to 20 people on each working group. And then we have a peer review group as well, so that whenever that work's being done, we have an additional 100 or so people to tap into for that peer review. And it's ever growing. When we started, we didn't have a pediatric group, for example. We didn't have the psychiatric and psychological aspects group was tied in with pain. We've now separated that to be 2 individual groups. We introduced a hematology group, and we're going to add more and more groups as time goes on, which is evident of how much kind of progression and understanding there has been. And this is what it led to. So the first thing that we tasked the consortium to do was to create diagnostic guidelines and management and care guidelines for the first time ever. The last time that the diagnostic criteria had been done was 1997. So by the time this was published, there'd been a 20-year gap. And as I said, never before published management and care guidelines. There were those 96 authors spanning from all around the world, 18 papers in the American Journal of Medical Genetics, and it is to date one of the highest number of downloads ever on an EDS and HSD paper, so much so that it continues to be a free access paper because there is so much demand and want for it. As I said, the number of people in the consortium has grown, and as has the tasks that we ask of them. What's so important to remember is that all of the people within each working group, every single health professional, and within every single working group, we have a patient voice and representative as well. Every single member of the consortium does it for free, sometimes at all hours of the day and night to accommodate the different time zones. And they are so dedicated to helping our community. And it's just wonderful to see. And we are completely indebted to their contributions and commitment to driving things forward for us. Since 2017, when we had published this paper, the next set of work that we tasked the group was to create common data elements, CDEs, so that could be implemented into our registry and also available at the NIH for wider use, so that we start to get this consistency around everywhere. Intermittently, in parallel, we've also tasked them with helping us with resources on our website, and we continue to ask them to publish in areas that we feel there's great needs and help us with diagnostic guidelines. So it's a tremendous resource, and it really expands on what we always think of as a medical and scientific board, which most non-profits have, including us. So we have on our medical and scientific board people strategically helping us with the direction of our organization. But this group is really proactively driving that research forward, doing the work that's needed, and most importantly, doing it together. You can see the impact of our work, of the consortium's work, and what that's done to publications on PubMed since 2016. It's gone from 900, it's at its peak, 946 on EDS and 129 on hypermobile EDS. So that's a large amount of publications there, and it continues to grow. And we're really proud of that. There are other, at the heart of what we do at the Society is collaborations. And there are other examples of how we've brought people together other than the consortium. And a couple I wanted to talk to you about. One of them is what was originally known as our Comorbidity Coalition, which is now our Community Coalition. And this was created back in 2018, initially from a PCORI grant, which is patient-centered outcomes research initiatives. And we wanted to bring together, again, really focusing on breaking down the fragmentation and the silos. We wanted to bring everyone together around a table to think about what the research priorities were for our community from a patient perspective. So we brought together other ally non-profit support groups, we brought together health professionals, and we brought together patient voices. And it was a tremendous success. And we've had one publication that's come out of the priorities and two that are at the moment seeking funding. And it was so successful that we lived on past the funding, and we've now been funded by independent donors. And it's evolved to the Community Coalition to really realize that it goes far past just the comorbidities. And we're taking on topics such as diversity, inclusion, still focusing on the research priorities, diagnostic guidelines. And it's such a wealth of voices coming together that really helps drive and ensure that we're always prioritizing the community's needs above anything else. Another group that we are really proud of, another coalition, is AHEAD. And this is focused on pediatric concerns that was at first kind of driven forward because of the concerns surrounding false allegations of child abuse in EDS. And we realized as we started those conversations and we held a round table that there was actually so much that was needed to do around pediatric concerns, including diagnostic guidelines. There's no real diagnostic criteria for the pediatric group. And so this group has again lasted out of what we thought initially was its remit, and more work, more and more people coming together, other organizations, and healthcare professionals, all focused on trying to improve things for the children impacted by this condition. And another example is the Hypermobility Biology Network. And this shows that, this came a couple of years after we first launched. And it shows the strength that comes from when you bring everyone together, how quickly you can then get everyone together working. I'd like to as well mention, because it sounds like it takes an army to do this in a village, and it does, absolutely, of people that are largely volunteers. But what's important to remember is then when we first launched in 2016, it was just myself full-time and one other part-time member. And we did the large part of all of that work up until 2018, just the two of us. And then we had incredible volunteers that we transitioned to staff. And we now have, I think, around 23 different staff members from all around the world working on this mission. So it's been a very, very fast acceleration of growth. But we started just a very, very small kind of kitchen table setup. And so you really can achieve a lot with very little. In 2018, we had a donor approach us, offering to donate $1 million to try and find the genetic causes behind the most prevalent type of EDS, the hypermobile type. And we had been planning with our consortium what our research priorities were. And we had developed a research roadmap of where we wanted to go. And part of that was knowing that the biggest question we had, research question, was, how do we find the genetic causes behind this type? So we already had the outline of an idea. And that's what preparation is, everything, because you never know when those donors are going to knock, when that grant call may be. And if you have the collaborative conversations and you have the priorities, then you can move very quickly. And that's what we did. And within, honestly, 24 hours of our initial contact with the donor, he had committed to pledging that donation. And we had contacted every single geneticist that was working around the world in silos trying to find the causes. And we got everyone together within a month, sitting around a table in New York saying, right, how do we best use this money to answer this question? And the Hypermobility Biology Network was formed, which again will outlive the initial HEDGE study because there will always be questions surrounding this. We then had a match of another $1 million to help see HEDGE through to the end. And our target was to recruit 1,000 people to do whole genome sequencing on. And I'm delighted that we've now identified, despite being in a global pandemic, we pivoted from doing in-person enrollment to virtual. And we've identified over 1,000 people now to be part of that study. And analysis will hopefully begin at the end of this year. So that's a really wonderful example of how that groundwork can really come together. And this is just a handful of the research that we've funded since 2018. In 2018, we had $25,000. Well, like I said, when we launched, really the heart of what we wanted to do was fund research. And we had this dream of being able to give $1 million a year to the scientific community. In 2018, we were only able to give 25,000, but everyone was extraordinarily grateful because our scientific community had never had this kind of research funding. And so we did some micro grants, and we were able to, I think, fund one other larger study. In 2019, putting it out there in the universe and being able to articulate with donors that approached us, we then had someone donate $1 million to our research program. And we were able to do a clinical focused 400,000 and a basic science 400,000. And then we did micro grants as well. And then we had 10% of the overheads go towards the organization to enable us to then employ people to run this very robust research plan that we had. It takes a hell of a lot of work. And don't underestimate that. I think that is important, and you need to set aside administrational costs to cover that kind of work. And the kind of standard across the board is 10%, and that's what we went with as well. I'm delighted to say that in 2020, we also were able to fund $1 million, and in 2021, we have given out $500,000, and we still hope and pray and continue to put out there to the universe that we will meet our million this year as well, despite all the barriers that we're all facing with the global pandemic that is making absolutely fundraising and everything else and research so much harder. But we continue to fight on and know that research really is the driving force behind how we're going to move everything forward. So that's all from me. Thank you very much for allowing me to share our experiences with you. I unfortunately forgot to put my contact slide at the end of this, but if you pretty much type Lara Bloom into any platform, you should hopefully find me, and I'm very open to answering any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks, everybody. Now we're going to start taking a few questions. One of the first questions, do you recommend creating a scientific advisory board that includes clinicians, researchers, and biopharma industry? I'll go ahead and speak a little bit to this while Lara and Samathi gather their thoughts on it. So for my organization, we have not included anyone from industry. So we have both clinicians and researchers, but we have not engaged anybody from industry.
Yeah, we're the same. And I think that it's important to know that without pharma, you can't exclude pharma, but you have to do it with good governance, and you have to ensure that it's included in the right way. And I think if we were to think about bringing together a committee of industry, it would be separate to a medical and scientific board, and you would turn to that pharma group for focused questions that would be related to them. And I think it would, in my opinion, and I'm always open to say I may change my opinion, but I think it would be a mistake to bring industry into a medical and scientific board.
I completely agree. We do not have industry in our medical advisory board. They're completely an independent entity, and I think it could be a conflict of interest to actually bring in industry into that partnership. And I love Lara's idea of creating a separate board with industry, because they are all important ultimately to the development of treatment and cures.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right. We have a ton of questions, so thank you guys so much for these. And please do keep them coming. Next question, if you're tracking publications as a way to show support, to show impact, do you track just those that cite your foundation for support, or anything about your disease?
We do it related to the disease, because I think it's a mistake to just credit your one organization, and potentially the work you do facilitates other organizations and other professionals. Ultimately, you all have the same mission at the end of the day, to improve things for the community and the condition. So we track that, and we do not claim to be the only people responsible for that growth. It takes a village, and there's a lot of people working really hard to have an impact on the growth of publications. So yeah, for us, it's condition focused.
Samathi, did you want to add anything?
No, that's perfect.
Okay. Yeah, same for us. Ours is condition focused as well. All right, next question. I had a couple of questions come through specifically for you, Lara. Let's see. How did you initiate the Comorbidity Coalition, and how did you start the networking?
So, as I said, it was from a PCORI grant, and the PCORI grant was intended. So we applied for the grant with the intention to set up the Comorbidity Coalition, and we did that because we realised the importance of not just bringing together health professionals, but also bringing together patient organisations and the patient voice in leading the research priorities. And although we had patient voices in all of the groups in the consortium, ultimately it's a scientific group of people that brings in the patient voice. We wanted this to be a patient-led collaboration that brought in the professional voice and flip it round. And so we were extremely grateful to be awarded that funding. And I think the funding is for 2 years, and it enables you to come together and have in-person meetings. And I think we had 3 a year. And at each meeting, we worked on devising the research priorities. Once, honestly, it went from a list of almost 100 to 3 that we agreed on for what those research priorities were. And then we split up into working groups, and each group focused on developing a formal proposal and trying to find funding for those priorities. And as I said, once that funding came to an end, we were very lucky that a donor had been really impressed by the work and was really determined to see it continue. And so we then moved into resources for the website, and various other things that the coalition have helped us. It's almost like an incredible focus group to have there, that everyone is helping everyone. And you know, if anything, we've been frustrated over the past year or so. We last met together in person in January 2020, pre-pandemic, and we're so used to meeting in person, it continues that work, and it has felt limited by it being virtual. So we have actually this weekend our next virtual meeting, but we hope and pray we can come together in person. But it really is, the root of it is collaboration, and just remembering that it's not just scientific collaboration that's important. Some of the biggest fragmentation you see is amongst other patient organizations, and I think it's essential that everyone is working together on a shared mission.
Can you elaborate on microgrants? So what do you consider a micro amount, and what was the criteria that you used to choose those projects? Excuse me.
Sure, no, absolutely. So with the consortium, we devised our research roadmap and priorities. And if you go onto our website and click on, which is ehlers-danlos.com, EHLERS-DANLOS.com, and click on research, you'll see research priorities, and it's an extensive layout. And so the microgrants were for funding that aligned with those research priorities of 25,000 each time. No, 50,000 each time, I'm sorry. So a 50,000 in the spring, a 50,000 in the fall, and anywhere from 5,000 up to 5,000 for each microgrant. So it allowed us to give out, a fair amount. And we have a whole criteria list. Each one is different based on whether it's basic science or clinical, and we frame it like that. And the people that it takes to really do that properly, it takes a lot. We couldn't have done that when there were 2 of us. You do need to have a team that help you with that kind of level of research giving, to manage the funding securely and appropriately, but to also manage the admin involved in all those researchers applying, all the applications that come in, getting in the reviewers, ensuring they're internationally peer reviewed, ensuring you get the feedback back to the people that applied, then getting agreements signed, then getting the funding out to them, tracking that, ensuring that all the things that were in the agreement they've met, you've met. It's a ton of work. But it's, that's why it's important that when you go about doing this, it's so tempting. And we did it on one of our first research donations. We put 100% into research, because you're just like, research. But if you don't take away that administration overhead, then you're not going to be able to deliver the work. So it's just so important to remember that.
Thank you. I I think, Samathi, this might be a good one for you. What's the ideal size for a medical and scientific advisory board? And do you see a distinction between an MSAB that provides leadership and guidance, and then a separate, larger network of clinicians and researchers who are part of your community, but you don't necessarily go to for guidance?
Yes, sure. I'll take the second question first. I like the idea of MSAB and a bigger network, which is exactly how we function. We have a large network of physicians around the world who we reach out to whenever a patient comes up. They're willing to guide us. They're willing to actually put out our research proposals. They actually distribute it through their local societies while we have the MSAB as the core. As far as an ideal size, for our organization, we just have 500, and we have not even detected 500 people in the US who have the condition. So for us, a number of 6 to 7 seems to work well. I would say to keep it relatively small, because you need them to work collaboratively with one another. And you can have, like Lara has done, it's fine to split off, have the core MSAB, and then have working groups. And that is fine to do, and which is essentially what we do. We don't state as such, but that's essentially how it happens. So I like the idea of within 10 for our organization. It's nice to have an odd number, because when you vote, they tend to vote differently. We like an odd number if it's possible. Sometimes it isn't. But I like a smaller MSAB, and we are able to function very effectively with this group. Lara could add more to this. And Kelsey?
Yeah, I would say, so we've got to think around 12 to 15, and I would say 15 is the max that you want to have it. Small is better. And I think you've also got to remember what the remit and charge is for a medical and scientific board. You've got a board of directors, that's the governance, the finance, everything else. And then you have your medical and scientific board. And really the best way to use that kind of board is for them to drive your strategic planning in terms of science and medicine, and for them to also be there to turn to ask questions. But ultimately it's to help you drive the organization in the best way forward. And then we've got the consortium, which is made of the working groups, which is much more, how do we do this? Can you help with that? And so on. And everyone in our medical and scientific board is also on the consortium. It's not either or. And I think when you work in a small community, you understand that there's overlap. There's some people that are in more than one working group in our consortium. So I think the most important thing when you're dealing with very busy medical professionals is be very clear with the ask, the objective, and the purpose of whatever you are inviting them to be part of, because it is different. And when we have our medical and scientific board meetings, we've got one coming up in a few months, the purpose is very, very different to when we get together with our consortium. So as long as it's clear and you outline it, I think it's less important about the numbers, but I would say no more than 15.
Okay, great. Thank you both. So here's one that we actually talked about a little bit in our prep session. So how do you balance fundraising and funding research with other programs? Do you have a set budget for research per year, or do you raise money with a particular RFP in mind and then open it when you hit that goal? So before I turn it over for them to answer, one of the things that we talked about is, when you are a small organization, you have to be really kind of strategic in where you put your money. Because I think particularly in rare disease, there's this kind of, you're just so excited that somebody wants to study your disease that you just are, almost willing to just give them money. But it's really an important thing to come up with those funding strategies and priority areas, and then go from there. But Laura, Samathi, do you have other things to add? I'm sorry.
Yes. So as you said, it's important to have the strategy, and we use both. Sometimes we have an RFP, and this year what happened is we had a set amount for a grant, and when so many requests for proposals, we had so many, a donor came forward and matched our grant. So sometimes it helps to put those out and go to your donors and say, hey, we have this, can you help us? And they will actually do that. So we so far have not put out RFPs and looked for grants for them, but this year, it happened to work out that way. Most often we raise the funds and then go forward with whatever our MSAB tells us is the priority. We work with them and the community to determine what is important for us. And we also work with the consortiums. And consortiums will actually sometimes do this research. They collaborate with us, and it's as long as we're doing the work, there is actually no funding needed. And we have done a couple of studies where we've not put in dollars and cents, but hours into our studies. Lara?
Yeah, so we do all of our research funding through RFPs. It's definitely the best way in terms of governance to do it, and it also allows you to attract donors, researchers that you may not know of, that then you are able to identify. So I think it's different. What we never do though is do an RFP without committed funding, because I don't think that's fair to the scientific community. But there's always people out there that want to match, and you're right. If there's any left over that haven't been funded that are really that have been reviewed very well, then there's always the opportunity that you can go to donors with those proposals. But I know we're running over, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, thank you so much, and I apologize. I've not done well with my moderator duties. So yes, we've already gone over. Thank you guys so much for your questions. Thank you so much to Laura and Samathi for their great presentations and insights. Before you guys head to the next session, please take a few minutes to respond to the polls that are being launched right now. We really appreciate your feedback on this session, and we want to ensure that we're able to provide great content and programming for the rare disease community going forward. You're also invited to share your feedback via email to events@globalgenes.org. The next session will begin at 1 p.m. Eastern, and in the meantime, we encourage you to visit the poster hall and chat with the authors who are going to be live during this hour. Lastly, we encourage you to check out the agenda for the remainder of the event, including the office hours at 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time and the Cure Accelerator live pitch event at 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Also, please be sure to take some time to explore the event page, visit the posters, and build your itinerary for the remainder of the week. Plus, visit the Achievements and Badges tab to learn more about how you could win a pass to a future Global Genes program. Thanks again for joining us, and we hope that you guys have a really great conference.